Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. NATO allies say it's a done deal. Defense spending is going up to 5% of GDP. US President Donald Trump calls this decision a big win for the US. Collecting aid in Gaza remains deadly, with over 50 reportedly shot by Israeli fire, while Israeli forces say Hamas targeted and killed 7 of its soldiers. And Israel says it is in direct contact with Syria and is exploring normalization of ties. Now to our top story. NATO allies have confirmed their ironclad commitment to boost defence spending to 5% of GDP by 2035 on the summit's final day in The Hague. The US President Donald Trump has hailed this as a historic milestone and was quick to take credit for it. Let's take a listen.
In a very historic milestone this week, the NATO allies committed to dramatically increase their defense spending to that 5% of GDP, something that no one really thought possible. And they said, "You did it, sir, you did it." Well, I don't know if I did it, but I think I did. This will be known as the Hague Defense Commitment, which is pretty good, pretty appropriate. When the allies reach this number, it will add more than $1 trillion a year. Think of that, $1 trillion per year to our common defense. And this is a monument really to victory, but it's a monumental win for the United States because we were carrying much more than our fair share. It was quite unfair, actually.
We can now go live to Counterpoints host Melinda Nucifora, who is live from the NATO summit at The Hague for us. Melinda, there was a lot of concern leading up to this summit, and that was that the US wouldn't recognize NATO's joint defense pact. Have those fears now pretty much been squashed?
Well, we heard President Trump, Leigh-Ann, referring to that joint defence in his comments that you've played just there, and that was the big concern leading into this NATO summit. It circles around Article 5. That is the joint defence pact of NATO, that an attack on one is an attack on all. Now, President Trump has made no secret of his scepticism of these multinational groupings such as NATO. It simply doesn't fit with his America First standing. So when he was asked on Air Force One on his journey into The Hague whether the US would come to Europe's defence, he was pretty vague. He said there's a lot of ways you can interpret Article 5, and that really struck fear into the hearts of leaders and the defence ministers of the other NATO countries. So it was with a big sigh of relief that the countries heard the US President recommit to Article 5. He's said things during his closing press conference. He said that he is viewing the alliance a little differently now, he says, after hearing how much these leaders love their countries. And he gave what he called an ironclad promise that the US would be here to help them protect their country. So that's one concern off the table at the NATO summit. There was another surprising moment that involved the US president in the lead up to the NATO Hague meeting, and that was on his way in, once again, that expletive-ridden comments about Iran and Israel. He was asked about that in his opening press conference that he had side by side with the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. He was asked to clarify those comments, and that led to, once again, another pretty surprising moment here at the NATO summit with the Secretary General Mark Rutte. Have a listen to what the two men said.
They're not going to be fighting each other. They've had it. They've had a big fight, like two kids in a schoolyard. You know, they fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes. Then it's easier to stop them.
And then Daddy has to sometimes use strong language to
You have to use strong language. Every once in a while you have to use a certain word.
Yes, of course. Mark Rutte there calling Donald Trump daddy. Melinda, it's been trending on Twitter all day. And also the fact that Marco Rubio laughed about it a little bit later on when Donald Trump was asked about the daddy comments. So something that's been causing a bit of a stir on social media. But the other big focus of this year's Leaders Summit was the agreement to boost defense spending. This has been a hot topic. Can you break it down for us?
Yeah, well, maybe NATO's daddy had to put his foot down when it came to defence spending as well, because this has been a real sticking point for the US President Donald Trump. If you cast your minds back to 2018, this was the point where he said the US could walk if other European countries didn't stump up more defence spending. And even though there was a lot of concern leading into the summit, they do seem to have gotten it over the line. It's going to be an increase from the current 2% defence spending target to 5% of GDP. But there is a little bit of creative accounting here, because it is actually only 3.5% of GDP on actual frontline spending. So that's things like ammunition, weaponry, missile defence, that sort of frontline protection and boots on the ground weaponry. The extra 1.5 is on what they're terming defence infrastructure, cyber security. It can even be used for countries to improve their roads, with the argument that that would allow troops to move more easily around the continent. So what it is being interpreted as by defence experts on the outskirts here in the media centre of the NATO summit is that this is a compromise. It allows President Trump and NATO to say, yep, we've had a success, we're all stumping up now to 5%, but it gives some wriggle room to some of these cash-strapped European countries that are going to find that really hard to sell to their domestic audiences. One of those countries is Spain. It's the only country that is not saying within absolute clarity that it will commit to 5%. The Spanish Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, saying that he believes Spain can meet its commitment without reaching that 5% of GDP goal. Not surprisingly, that has drawn the ire of US President Donald Trump, and he's even threatening that he's going to double the tariffs, toughen up the trade deal against Spain unless it falls into line.
Melinda, Nucifora, Counterpoints host, thank you so much for joining us. Let's continue this conversation with John Kavulich, a senior editor for outcome modelling analysis at Issue Insight. John, a pleasure to have you on. I was just talking to our reporter Melinda, who is at The Hague. NATO members, including the US, have confirmed a 5% spending commitment. John, how significant is this for the future of the alliance?
It's significant, but it's never going to happen collectively. And that's primarily because at the current rate, which is about 2.5%, look at, let's say, an economy like Turkey, a $1 trillion plus economy that's approaching 2 trillion. 5% of GDP would be $100 billion a year. Now, just like Spain, you're going to have more and more of these countries, the further away they are from the border of Russia, they're going to say that we just can't spend that money. Our taxpayers won't allow it. And we need to spend that money on healthcare, education, infrastructure, lowering taxes, lowering fees, et cetera. So this is very aspirational. The kick-in date, 2030, 2035, not only will President Trump be out of office, he may no longer be with us.
And John, yesterday it was the F-bomb. Today it was the love bomb from Mark Rutte, who praised Trump in his NATO speech. Is Rutte the President Donald Trump whisperer, as it appears, despite concerns the US president wasn't committed to Article 5 on his way to the NATO summit? Now he appears to be in. What's the situation there?
Well, very much Mr. Rutte, sent a basically dear leader, sort of, you hearken back to President Trump's first term when he got this massive piece of paper and a huge envelope from Kim Jong-il in North Korea, and he said it was a love letter. This is very, it's just consistent with people, dear leader, thank you, you're the greatest, you're the best. So I'm not so sure it means an awful lot, but on Article 5, that's significant, and this is the reason why. Article 5 isn't what everyone seems to think it is. It doesn't mean that if one country is attacked, the others have to come to its defense. Article 5 was written in a way that it can be interpreted. And it was written in that way specifically because of the United States in the 1940s. They didn't want to have anything that required them to do anything. So if you read the text of Article 5, it says that if a member is attacked, a country will determine on its own, independently, not necessarily militarily, what kind of assistance it may or may not provide. So President Trump, is pretty much still holding that what he said on Air Force One is correct. Article 5 can be interpreted in many ways, and he's going to do that. So I don't think anyone should count on the fact that if a NATO member is attacked, that the United States is going to come running in with military support.
So during President Trump's speech, he said the US was considering sending more Patriot missile batteries to Ukraine to fend off Russian attacks. Is this a sign that his conversation with Zelensky was more measured and that the US is stepping up support for the Ukrainian side?
It was a 50-minute meeting, and neither, the readout from the government of Ukraine was that they were satisfied, sort of diplomatic speak. But, a good day when President Trump comes out and says, hey, we're looking at this equipment. But there are two issues. The first is having the Patriot batteries in inventory. There just aren't that many. It takes about a year to build them. The countries that have them currently don't want to give them to Ukraine. And it's ironic because President Zelensky has been running around for the last now 4 years telling everyone that they're next. When Russia gets done with Ukraine, they're going to roll right into Europe. So you better start spending money. You better start protecting yourselves. So then when President Zelensky goes to these governments and say, hey, give me your Patriot, you're not using it, they go, whoa, 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 you told us we need to get ready. So that Patriot's not going anywhere. The other is that President Zelensky has said that he's willing to pay for all of this stuff. Now, in Donald Trump language, that's something he always loves to hear. So what we didn't get are the specifics in terms of what kind of request did President Zelensky make, what kind of offer did President Trump make, and where's the money coming from? So Ukraine's obviously going to need to get it from other people.
And John, I just want to talk about another big story that's been dominating the headlines. And President Trump and Pete Hegseth hit back at reporters that said Iran's nuclear sites were not obliterated. Is it possible to know if these sites have been completely destroyed in such a short space of time?
There's a tremendous amount of intelligence. The Israelis have incredible intelligence in Iran. The U.S. does as well. Other countries do. And right now, we basically have to wait for the Iranian government to come out and say exactly what happened. We're going to get a lot of reports, open source. We're seeing a lot of satellite data. But it is going to take a while to determine what really was destroyed and then what really was damaged, and then what are the Iranians going to do? Are they going to try to replace what was destroyed and repair what was damaged? Or are they going to call it a day and say, we're no longer interested in processing uranium for civilian purposes. We're fine with importing it from Russia or somewhere else and develop nuclear power plants and also use it for nuclear medicine, for example. We just don't know yet, but President Trump he's wild. He's furious about the fact that the initial intelligence assessments that supposedly were leaked said that not quite certain how much damage was done. Well, this is a president whose favorite words are total and complete. So when he puts out total and complete, and then someone says not quite total, not quite complete, he's going to go on the warpath. So we all just have to wait to see. And basically, we'll be counting on the Iranian government and then counting on people within the Iranian government who come out and say, hey, this is what happened.
John Kavulich, Senior Editor from Outcome Modelling Analysis at Issue Insight. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show and your thoughts. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, ma'am.
Let's turn our focus to the ongoing humanitarian situation in Gaza. In the latest string of deadly incidents near aid distribution sites, at least 50 Palestinians were reportedly killed by Israeli fire while waiting to collect food. In a separate incident, the Israeli army reported that 7 IDF soldiers were killed in Khan Yunis after their armored vehicle was hit by an explosive device, marking one of the deadliest attacks on Israeli forces in months. For more on this, I'm joined by Adnan Abu Hasna, UNRWA media spokesperson for Gaza. Adnan, a pleasure to have you back on the show. At least 50 people were killed waiting for aid by Israeli fire in 2 incidents in central and southern Gaza. Why are aid sites in Gaza seeing what appears to be daily violence?
Yes, it is actually a death trap, for the Gazans, for, very weak people. They are starving. They are just looking for food. The Israelis and this organization, it's called Gaza Humanitarian Organization, called them, to come and to collect food. They are coming with, 50,000, sometimes 200,000 people, approaching the 3 sites or 1 or 2 sites. Unfortunately, no one understands what's going on, actually. They shot at people when they go. They shot at people when, go back to their homes while they are holding food parcel. Without that, it's a big mess. These guys are working with this organization. They have no idea about humanitarian work, about international law. But why the Israeli soldiers, behaving like that? Right now, we did not find anything to guide us to reach to that result. Why they are killing people? Why they are killing, starved people? Actually, they have nothing. They lost everything. They lost their homes. They lost their, jobs. They just, looking for food for their kids. And finally, it's really, a death trap that if you go, okay, you can find something, but on the other hand, you will be shot and maybe you will die. No one knows what's going on.
So the argument on the Israeli side is that the GHF was open, so Hamas couldn't get hold of the aid, keep that aid and sell it on for a higher price. From your experience and your teams working on the ground in Gaza, is Hamas coming to these sites to collect aid? Is that the issue here?
They claim all the time that they are replacing the UN system, replacing 400 food distribution points that is being run, by UNRWA and other UN organizations, by 3, food points, that run by GHF. Okay, this is they claim all the time. They argue all the time that it's better and the food will not go to any, political parties. Now they are telling us that maybe some people, some people from Hamas or other organizations are collecting food. Who can believe that? We don't understand. We have the system. We have a system in place, and we have 400 food distribution, centers or points. We have thousands of staff that, dealing with that, and not tens of retired military that they have no idea about food distribution, about how to treat people, because it's not only about, distributing food. It is a cultural issue, that how you treat people that are nearly 2 years, they are hungry, starving, they lost everything, lots of anger, lots of frustration. It needs really experts, to deal with Gazans. But if they say that, if the Israelis, now are saying no guarantee for, Palestinian political parties can collect food from the side, it is a big failure also, because they said that this system will replace the bad system that is being run by UNRWA and others, they can, take control of the food or the support, the supplies that coming into Gaza. So it is really contradiction and controversial statements.
So yesterday, I actually spoke to former Israeli government minister Benny Gantz. I asked him for his thoughts on the killings at the aid distribution centres. Can you just take a listen to the clip for me, and then we'll talk about it afterwards?
We cannot afford to stop fighting against Hamas in Gaza, nor we should stop supplying food for the people of Gaza as much as we can. Unfortunately, during the campaign in Gaza, we saw that Hamas is taking control over the humanitarian support that is being pushed inside, keeping it in his own storage, and selling it to the society, to civilians in ridiculous high prices. So we are seeking always way to buffer between Hamas control of the humanitarian support and making sure that the people of Gaza actually gets them. So I think that's what we should do in Gaza to continue. And in Gaza we are not revenging, because there's nothing that we can do in Gaza to satisfy our revengement sense after what they did to us on October 7. Nor are we retaliating in Gaza. All we do in Gaza is securing our future over there, from there.
So there we are. We just listened to Benny Gantz there, and he seems resolute on the fact that Israel is not having revenge in Gaza and about the aid sites. What did you make of his comments?
Actually, he did not answer your question. You ask him about the killing of starving people, in Gaza. He talks about Hamas controlling and, and so on. Now, the big question is like that. You created a new system. You are calling people to come to collect food. Why every day 50 people or 60, 200 are being injured? Every day on daily basis are being killed. This is the big question. They are not armed people. They are hungry, starving, losing everything. They are weak. They are walking, tens of kilometers to reach that site. And after that, why did you shoot them? This is the big question. You lost control. You cannot control what's going on. Why you continue killing? Why you continue, distributing in a very messy way? This is the big question. You have a system in place. You have the UN organizations. You have thousands of staff working on that. We used to cooperate for decades with the Israeli side in how to distribute. We have the names, the data, and sending them to the Israelis if they want. We are ready to cooperate in that. But to continue on that system, that it's now routine. It's normal. It's becoming normal to kill, every day 50 and to injure, 100, 200, 400, no matter, the figures. They're just numbers. Even now, we cannot find, Israeli officials even justifying the shooting at the weak and the starving, people. In the past, after 1 or 2 days, they said, no, we did not do that. But now, even they don't comment, unfortunately.
So the UN and major aid groups have refused to cooperate with the GHF, like you were just talking to me about there. What is UNRWA doing to help those on the ground to survive? Do you still have operations inside Gaza for people who are desperate?
Look, the only thing that the UN organization are not doing now is the food distribution. we try to help. If WFP and other UN organizations succeeded in getting in, food stuff, of course we will be helping them and distributing because we have the capacity. We have 13,000 staff in the Gaza Strip. But unfortunately, since May 19, right now, only 9,000 tons of food and supplies getting into Gaza. It means we can get all that in one day. There's nothing to distribute. But the health system still, operating. We are treating nearly 19 or 18,000 Palestinians on daily basis, collecting, waste, also, running, some water wells. Psychological support. We have, hundreds of staff, working on psychological support. We are running more than 90 shelters that more than 100,000 Palestinians, receiving help from us. But the only thing that we as a UN system, we are not doing right now, distributing food, because no real amount of food actually got into Gaza since March 2.
And I just wanted to ask you, Adnan, at your hospitals and at places where people are being treated, are you seeing adults and children with malnutrition? Is that the situation? Obviously, we're foreign reporters. We're not allowed to enter Gaza. And also, how are people coming to the hospitals after attending the aid sites? What have you been hearing?
It is a catastrophe. Even, the terminology catastrophe is not suitable. It's beyond catastrophe what's going on in Gaza. Nearly 50% of, medical supplies are running out. We don't have, enough supplies. And in the governmental, sector, the governmental hospitals, as example, it's worse than what we have on UNRWA. But at UNRWA, we can talk about, 50% of the medical supplies and medicines run out. Actually, malnutrition, it's, you can find tens of thousands of people, of children. You can feel that. You can see them in the streets. They cannot walk. Look at their faces. Most of the children, they lost half of their weight in Gaza. Not only the children, we can talk about the whole population. 95% of Gazans are suffering of food insecurity. People are taking one meal every 48 hours. It's just unbelievable. It's craziness, actually, what's going on. It's beyond children, women, and, it is a big mess. It is a catastrophe. And especially now after, what happened after shifting the attention towards the Iranian and the Iranian-Israeli war. So situation becoming more dangerous and worse than before.
Adnan Abu Hasna, UNRWA media spokesperson for Gaza, thank you so much for your insights and best of luck.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. The UK will buy at least 12 F-35 stealth jets that can carry nuclear weapons to boost national security. Currently, Britain's nuclear capability is limited to submarine launch missiles. The order is expected to support 20,000 jobs in the F-35 programme and will support 100 local businesses. Now, the trial of an Australian woman accused of murdering 3 of her estranged husband's elderly relatives has reached its final stages. Erin Patterson is accused of deliberately adding poisonous mushrooms in a beef Wellington lunch in July 2023. The jury will begin deliberating the verdict for the case. Patterson repeatedly denied the charges and said the deaths were a terrible accident. A U.S. district judge has blocked the Trump administration from withholding funds previously awarded to 14 states for electric vehicle charger infrastructure. In February, the government froze $5 billion in funding allocated under the Biden presidency. The court order will go into effect on the 1st of July unless the Trump administration files an appeal blocking it. And a suspect in the bombing of a California fertility clinic in May has died in federal custody. Facility employees initiated life-saving measures on Daniel Park, who was then taken to hospital where he was pronounced dead. Park was awaiting trial after being indicted for malicious destruction of property. Israel says it's in direct talks with neighbouring Syria. That is, according to Israel's national security advisor, who says that he has been speaking to the Syrian president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, on a daily basis to explore the possibility of normalising ties. For more on this, I'm joined by Navvar Shaban, researcher at Harmoon Centre, and he is joining me from Istanbul. An absolute pleasure to have you on the show, Navvar. So what is the state of the current relationship between Israel and Syria following the liberation of the country?
Basically, first of all, thank you for having me. Basically, the relationship is in a critical limbo situation. We still see that there is an ongoing violation, ongoing vicious attack from the Israeli side in the south. We had heard like official statement from President al-Sharaa, from Assad Shibani also talking about an indirect and direct talks with Israel about critical issues. Basically, on the other half, we see the official Israeli talking about an ongoing talks for reconciliation, normalization, all of these kind of stuff. But it is far from being believable because we have a critical issue right now. We don't have the solid ground to initiate such kind of talks. To jump to a so-called normalization talk, you need a solid ground on for these kind of like talks. Basically, now you have a critical issues. You have several violations. You have invading the space, you have the strikes. So basically, the most like proper way to define the relationship, it's in a critical limbo situation. It's not moving forward, it's not moving backward. It is exactly where it is a month ago.
So there's almost a stalemate if we think about it in these talks. But what are Israel's main objectives during these talks? What exactly are they looking for?
Yeah, so these two questions are connected exactly because basically what makes the relationship in this situation month ago, the roof of the demand from the Israeli side are super high. They are talking about a buffer zone. They are talking about an area with no any kind of presence for security or Ministry of Defense forces. On the other hand, they are talking also that they need this area to be clear and secure. So here's the ridiculous thing. You're demanding an area which is in Syria to be secure, but at the same time, you will bomb whatever forces, official forces, try to secure this area. And whenever there is an initiate attack done by any kind of proxies or heading cells from the southern region, the Israeli will strike back by attacking different locations. We saw this in the beginning of this month. There was a missile attack from Al-Yarmouk area in Daraa. The retaliation from the Israeli side was to bomb 7 different locations in Daraa and in southern Damascus. So here is the thing. They needed to be buffered. They need to expand the buffer zone. On the other hand, the Syrian side are talking about going back to the 1974 buffer zone agreement. They are talking about the immediate haltage of any kind of violation on the ground. So when we see these kind of statements from the Israeli side, we need to focus also at the same time they are keep doing the violation on the ground. While this statement was going on air, there was an expansion for some of the Israeli forces in northern Quneitra and demolishing homes, removing trees. And just a week ago, they arrested 3 men, and they are not released yet. So here is the dilemma and all of that. They are talking about an ongoing daily talks. They are talking about we are still monitoring al-Sharaa behavior, but at the same time, they are there is an ongoing violation on the ground. This is, and they are benefiting from something very important. There is a lack of official statement from the Syrian side. The Syrian side should have an official statement to highlight all kind of like ongoing talk to the public, to the Syrian public, because they need to know. When there is a statement from the Israeli side talking about an ongoing talks, people will say that, oh, okay, there might be an ongoing talks, without specifying what are these talks. But I do recommend that there should be a statement from the Syrian side talking about what kind of talks are happening. Is it technical talk? Is it related to security matters? Is it related to the violation in the south? Is it related to the attempts from the Israeli side to play on the minority aspect in Syria, which they did in I think March and April, when there was talk with the Druze community, certain figures of them, of course. So all of that should be clear also from the Syrian government.
And Navvar, we just have spoken about this before on the show, you and me. And I just wanted to say, you mentioned there Israel is still looking at Ahmed al-Shaara's position of power. Right now, how is that holding up in Syria? Is it being successful or is it still fragile?
So basically it is, I'm not going to say it's purely successful. We're talking about an area of conflict for more than 14 years, direct conflict in different geographical area. Of course, it's not fully successful, but it is it's improving. There is a lot of things need to be done on different sectors. So I think, but mainly when the Israeli are talking, they are talking about the so-called jihadi behavior. They are talking about the previous act of President al-Shaara and his ties with al-jihadi sphere in the area. So there was, in the statement today from the Israeli side, that they are monitoring his behavior onward. Basically, it's obvious that the current threat of the, let's say, the past of President al-Shaara is a threat for Syria right now. And we saw that in the recent attack in Mar Elias, in Damascus, in the Dwala district. So basically, yeah, there need to be done a lot of things when it comes to the past of President al-Shaara on an internal level in Syria, and I think the Israeli side are monitoring these kind of things. What kind of things are improving? What kind of behavior are happening? But mainly, I do believe that the Israelis are not talking about something which I think is the most thing that they are worried about, is the tools of the X cells or proxies that Iran used to work with. And we know that there have been a couple of arrests against Palestinian groups that have been working in Syria with Iran previously during the Assad regime. But the point is, are these arrests part of the talks? I do not believe that, because these arrests are happening on national level, because those groups used to work with Iran, and Iran working in Syria, as the Iranian regime working in Syria, have been a threat for the Syrian for since 2012, direct intervention. So basically, all the proxies that are tied to Iran are subjected to be arrested. But I do believe that the Israeli side are also monitoring these kind of things.
Navvar Shaban, researcher at Harmoon Center. A pleasure to have you on the show and your insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Let's take a look at the top business news now. Federal traffic safety regulators are looking into possible problems with Elon Musk's test run of self-driving robo-taxis in Texas. That comes after videos surfaced showing them braking suddenly and going through an intersection from a turning lane, and also driving down the wrong side of the road. However, many other videos show robo-taxis driving perfectly. Now, drug makers GSK and India's Bharat Biotech say they will slash the price of their malaria vaccine to under $5 a dose by 2028. Mosquirix is the first malaria shot approved by the World Health Organization. The price cut aims to boost access in low-income countries, especially in Africa, where malaria kills over 500,000 people a year. Now to all the sports news. Brazilian football star Neymar has signed a new deal with his boyhood club Santos, extending his stay until December. The 33-year-old rejoined Santos in January after parting ways with Saudi Arabia's Al Hilal. Neymar says the club is his home, also his roots, and the place where he wants to fulfill the remaining dreams of his career. And England won the first test against India by 5 wickets, with opener Ben Duckworth playing a starring role. It has been 15 years since an England opening batsman last scored a fourth innings 100. For India, dropped catches and 2 batting collapses ultimately cost them that game. And a reminder of our top stories. NATO allies say it's a done deal. Defense spending is going up to 5% of GDP. US President Donald Trump calls this decision a big win for the US. Collecting aid in Gaza remains deadly, with over 50 reportedly shot by Israeli fire, while Israeli forces say Hamas targeted and killed 7 of its soldiers. And Israel says it's in direct contact with Syria and is exploring normalization of ties. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on X. Counterpoints with Melinda Nucifora is coming up next. Plus, of course, we'll be back in a couple of hours' time with a W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you for joining.